Hello, welcome to Biz 113 Introduction to Business. Today we will be discussing business management. So let's encapsulate what managers actually do. It doesn't matter if you're a manager at a huge bank, if you're a manager at McDonald's, if you're a manager at a retail shop. Basically, all of these things will apply to you. So a manager is responsible for making a group of people more effective and efficient. You make the process effective by ensuring the right things get done and that they all contributed to the success of the enterprise. So effectiveness is really getting the job done correctly. You make the process efficient by ensuring that activities were performed in the right way using the fewest possible resources. So over here on the right, you'll see the efficiency in purple and effectiveness in green. And, ultimately you can boil every management job down to, are you efficient and are you getting the job done? Management has four specific zones of responsibility. Number one, planning. And this is the process of moving from the idea stage to the implementation stage. So you have this idea about a new product that will revolutionize the way people use their cell phones. Well, that idea is a wonderful thing, but until you can actually monetize it or, put it into some sort of sales model, it doesn't matter. So you always start with the plan first. Then there's the organizing, and these are the actions that allow the plan to become a reality. So when you have a plan, you have to then break it down into smaller pieces that we would call action items that will allow people to get the overall task done. Number three, directing. This is putting the resources and people in place to make things happen. In order to direct, a manager needs to be a leader who can motivate people to do a good job. So it's not enough to just tell people what to do. You have to motivate them. The hardest part of any management job, and I don't think very many people would disagree, is managing people. Managing a process, managing a machine, those are fairly standard ideas. You're dealing with nuts and bolts. Whereas a person, they may have been having a bad day, or they're emotionally fragile, or they're emotionally angry. There's all these things that we deal with to try and motivate people. Some people are motivated by saying, good job. Other people are motivated by, show me the money. So, as a manager, you're constantly gauging how your employees can do the best job they can do. Finally, number four, controlling resources to achieve specific goals. So managers measure the results and compare them with the results that were laid out in the plan. Based on the results of the measurement, the manager will often go back to the planning stage to ensure continued improvement in efficiency and effectiveness. So you'll see with this picture down below, it's all about creating a loop because you're always trying to be more effective and more efficient. So, for example, Disney World. Disney World opened in 1971. Since then, they've added Epcot, they've added Hollywood Studios, they've added Animal Kingdom, they've added 2 water parks, they've added a whole bunch of hotels. Now, the reason that they keep adding is because they keep putting new ideas in place. So we go back to that number one, planning stage. So, they have 10-year plans that will tell them what ride is going to be implemented in the Magic Kingdom, the Hollywood Studios, for years to come, because that allows them to constantly be improving and being more efficient. So let's talk about the planning process. In planning, managers set goals and determine the best ways to achieve them. As a result of the planning process, everyone in the organization knows what should be done, who should do it, and how it should be done. Step 1 is usually called strategic planning, which is the process of establishing an overall course of action. So, say for example that you are the head of a small company that sells rubber duckies, and you have 4 employees, and you have a plan to take over the rubber ducky market. And your employees are not financially invested other than getting a paycheck. So that strategic planning is going to be all about you. So you are the one who comes up with that planning process, but then you have to communicate that effectively with the folks who are working for you. If they don't understand your vision, they can't help you achieve your vision. Strategic planning is clarifying the overall purpose and desired results of an organization and how these results will be achieved. Activities related to strategic planning include: develop a mission statement that tells customers, employees, and others why the organization exists. Number 2, or second dot, identify core values or beliefs that will guide the behavior of members of the organization. Third dot, assess the company's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Then establish goals and objectives or performance targets to direct all the activities that you'll perform to achieve your mission. And finally, develop and implement tactical and operational plans to achieve goals and objectives. So these items, no matter what kind of industry you're in, are extremely important to the entire process of strategic planning. You can't do one and ignore the other because they are all tied in together. The mission statement describes the purpose of your organization, the reason for its existence. It tells the reader what the organization is committed to doing. So here are some examples. So the college that I teach for, the mission of the Pennsylvania Institute of Technology is student success. The college provides a supportive environment to enable committed students to succeed by offering the best collegiate education for career advancement, transfer opportunities, and personal growth. So, that is, in a nutshell, what every meeting and every discussion we have here at the college is involving. How do we get students to succeed? Second one is Google. Organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Now, if you think that Google, yeah, it's a search engine, but it's also your email. It can be where you keep your photos. But look at those first 4 words. Organize the world's information. So they have a very well written mission statement because it does capture the meat and potatoes of what Google does. Apple's mission. Apple designs Macs, the best personal computers in the world, along with OS X, iLife, iWork, and professional software. Apple leads the digital music revolution with its iPods and iTunes online store. Apple has reinvented the mobile phone with its revolutionary iPhone and App Store and is defining the future of mobile media and computing devices with the iPad. So Apple is a little bit more specific, and what you'll see is they're going in 3 main areas. You have your best personal computers, you have your digital music, and you have your cell phone media. So, they really do cover what is important to them. Now, core values affect how the planning process and operations are implemented. Core values are the small set of guiding principles that you identify as crucial to your company. These are the fundamental beliefs about what is important and what is not important for company activities. Core values should also guide the behavior of every individual in the organization. Volvo, for example, has 3 core values: safety, quality, and environmental care, and they define the firm's approach to product development, design, and production. And that's from a Volvo publication. Companies hold employees accountable for putting those values into practice, usually linking core values to performance evaluations and compensation. The business world's most popular core values include ethics and integrity, accountability, respect for others, and open communication. Then we move on to a SWOT analysis. A SWOT analysis is the process of analyzing an organization's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It begins with an examination of external factors that could influence the company in either a positive or a negative way. These could include economic conditions, competition, emerging technologies, laws and regulations, and customers' expectations. Depending on the external factors, they can either be helpful or hurtful. We examine the internal factors that could influence the company in either a positive or a negative way. So if you look at this square I have on the left-hand side, you'll see the words along the y-axis, external and internal, and along the x-axis is helpful and harmful. So by putting these letters to represent what we're talking about, you can see that we have internal things that are strengths and internal things that are weaknesses. We have external opportunities and external threats. So you want to keep in mind that there's not necessarily threats from within. We're talking about threats from without. Although that doesn't negate the fact that sometimes there are threats from within. Those are considered weaknesses. Strengths might include a motivated workforce, state-of-the-art technology, impressive managerial talent, or desirable location. Weaknesses might include obsolete technology or a poor location. Managers strive to capitalize on opportunities by taking advantage of organizational strengths. Managers will try to protect the organization from both external threats and internal weaknesses. So over here on the right, you'll see the questions that should be asked when you are doing a SWOT analysis. Moving on to goals and objectives. Goals are major accomplishments that the company wants to achieve over a long period, for example, 5 years. Objectives are shorter-term performance targets that direct the activities of the organization toward the attainment of a goal. They should be clearly stated, attainable, and measurable. They should give target dates for the completion of tasks and stipulate who's responsible for taking necessary actions. Goals and objectives change over time. As a firm reassesses its place in its business environment, it rethinks not only its mission, but also its approach to fulfilling it. So these are those short term goals that allow us to make sure that we are on the right track and that we are going towards the long-term things that we want to achieve. So from there, we now move into a tactical position. A long-range strategic plan is usually divided into several tactical plans. A 5-year strategic plan, for instance, might be implemented as 5 one-year tactical plans. The overall plan is broken down into more manageable, short-term components called tactical plans. The execution of the strategic plan involves managers at all levels. These plans specify the activities and allocation of resources, for example, people, equipment, or money, needed to implement the strategic plan over a given period. So in the triangle here, we are now developing the procedures, the procedure level, the tactical plans that'll help us get to where we need to be for our strategic plan. Operational planning is the next level, and this is when the tactical plan is then broken down into various operational plans that provide detailed action steps to be taken by individuals or groups to implement the tactical plan and ultimately the strategic plan. Operational plans cover only a brief period, say a week or a month. So, here are some operational planning that, a company might have. Build a six-figure website, continue building smaller profitable sites. This might be over 6 months. It might be over a month, in the center there. Post 1 or 2 times per week on social media. Again, this is one of those things where you have a specific goal, and whereas someone else might say, well, once or twice a week, are you kidding? That's like nothing. Whereas, another company might say that's once or twice a day. So, in addition to our regular management, we also have to have crisis planning. And even the best managed companies may have to deal with a crisis. Just because you are an ethical company that uses ethically sourced materials and that all of your workers are, there's a diversity and a gender neutral perspective, you've done everything right. Stuff still happens. So managing for uncertainty or crisis includes contingency planning and crisis management. So the thing is, if you don't have crisis planning, oftentimes what you see is the company is severely damaged because they haven't managed the crisis well enough. So let's talk about contingency planning first. Managers identify those parts of the business that are most likely to be negatively affected by change. They develop alternative courses of action in case an anticipated change does occur. So, in a personal light, you may be planning to see the new Star Wars movie on its opening night. But you may decide an alternative movie in case you can't get tickets to your first choice. So let's say you and your buddies, friends, girls, whoever, we're all going to go see this movie. And you all whip out your phones to order the tickets, and you find out that it's been sold out for weeks. Well, y'all were ready to go to a movie. Are you going to give up the plan, or are you going to go to something else, since that's a contingency? In a business-related example, consider what occurs when a large company's credit card system is hacked, such as Target. The company will have a contingency plan because this is something that happens to companies on a regular basis. So if a company comes out and says, we didn't have a plan, we didn't think this would happen to us, that is a really, really badly managed company. Crisis management. Some of the really big companies have crisis management teams that are specially trained to deal with emergencies. Team members gather information quickly and respond to the crisis while everyone else carries out their normal duties. The team also keeps the public, the employees, the press, and government officials informed about the situation and the company's response to it. So, when we think of crisis management, these are the 5 elements. You have preparation, you got to have a plan, you have to, and you can't prepare for every possible crisis. There's so many things that could potentially happen, but you have to have a generalized procedure in case of a crisis. So, when that zombie apocalypse happens, you have to have a plan. You know, can you prevent the problem? Is there identification? How do we identify the problem? How do we recover from it? And how do we continue to monitor it? So, one of the best ways to explain what not to do is to tell you a story of one of the worst crisis management responses of the last 50 years. And this is the British Petroleum case study. Um, the response to the British Petroleum or BP oil spill by its former CEO, Tony Hayward, is an example of poor crisis management. So, those of you who may not remember this happening, on April 20th, 2010, BP's Deepwater Horizon oil rig exploded, causing what has been called the worst environmental disaster in U.S. history. And 11 rig workers died that day. For 87 straight days, oil and methane gas spilled into the ocean from an uncapped wellhead, and there's a picture of that on the right hand side. The federal government estimated 4.2 million barrels of oil spilled into the Gulf of Mexico. It would take nearly 3 months before the leak was stopped and nearly 5 months before the well was effectively declared dead. So that's what was spewing out for close to 5 months. Despite the high likelihood of an oil spill, British Petroleum did not have a plan in place to manage this event. BP's initial response was to deflect blame by sending out a news release placing the blame on the owner of the oil rig, Transocean. That's like blaming the landlord when your neighbor turns out to be a serial killer. BP's CEO, Tony Hayward, consistently underestimated the magnitude of the spill as well as the environmental impact. Hayward confessed to the House of Representatives that the decisions and processes on the rig were not monitored closely by British Petroleum's management. So they sent out all these guys to work and pull oil and gas out of the sea, or out of the bedrock of the sea, but nobody was really paying any attention to what was going on there. Worse yet, the company failed to empathize with the predicament of those seriously affected by the spill, the families of those who lost their lives and those whose livelihoods were threatened. So again, what you're seeing is this callous disregard for humanity, for another human being, and more focus on the dollars and cents. And this right after one of these horrible tragedies occurs. You should empathize. You don't have to take responsibility, but you should empathize because 11 people lost their lives and everyone in their world is devastated. Everybody who lived along the Gulf of Mexico was devastated. And, there was this knee-jerk reaction by Tony Hayward that, not our responsibility, not our fault. Many of the choices were seen as ethical negligence. And that's, by the way, the picture of the oil rig burning for days. For example, British Petroleum's web teams and marketing executives in Houston and London purchased search terms and phrases on leading search engines like Google and Yahoo in order to drive traffic towards the company's spin of the situation and away from independent analysis elsewhere. So you're living in Mississippi and you want to know how this is going to affect your business. You maybe sell fresh fish or buy fresh fish. You go on Google, you type in BP oil spill. Well, BP's already gone in and paid Google to direct traffic to certain sites, where you see the little ad, and it's going to be these BP statements that mitigate how bad the situation actually was. Tony Hayward, by the way, going back, BP tried to block information about the oil flow rate, muzzled its employees, harassed photographers and members of the press, manipulated the flow of information by claiming proprietary rights over footage of the oil gushing into the Gulf. So basically, when you go after journalism, when you go after reporters, they know when something stinks. So, going after the press is just going to induce a feeding frenzy. They want to know what's going on because there's only one reason to cover something up, and that's because you've done something wrong. So it just makes them look even worse. Tony Hayward was replaced as CEO in October 2010 after his disastrous performance. Not even just we're talking several months. By the time the BP executives formulated a plan, the damage to their reputation had been done. The optimism spin that British Petroleum tried to put on the situation ended up looking like incompetence. And to this day, there are a lot of people in the South, especially, who refuse to go to a BP gas station. There's still people around the country who remember that BP was involved in this horrible, horrible situation. So let's talk about management from a day-to-day perspective. So as you move up the pyramid of management, and over here on the right you're seeing a triangle or a pyramid, bottom is your frontline manager, middle managers, and then top managers. Kind of makes it easy to remember. Management positions get more demanding as you go up. They carry more authority and responsibility along with more power and pay. Now here's the thing with being a top manager. You have to be ruthless because sometimes you're going to make decisions that will ultimately hurt some of your employees, hurt some of your customers. Not because you want them to be hurt, but because you can't afford to keep them on or you can't afford to keep making a certain product. Managers at that level have to make really hard choices, and at that point, a lot of people just bow out and say, I can't handle the stress. Top managers spend most of their time in planning and decision making, while the frontline or first line managers focus on day-to-day operations. And the day-to-day operations, where you're facing the customer, where you're facing your clients, that's hard. That in and of itself is very hard. And you have to develop your skill set over time. The only way you learn how to be a great customer service person is to work with customers on an everyday basis. So we'll start with the top managers. Over here on the right is Jeff Bezos, the richest man in the world right now. He is the CEO of Amazon, and CEO is a title you see along, and that stands for Chief Executive Officer. You also see a CFO, Chief Financial Officer, Chief Operating Officer, COO, and President. So lots of acronyms. They love acronyms. Responsibility of the top management, they're held accountable for the financial health and performance of the organization. Now, if the organization is a corporation which is publicly held, they have a responsibility to maintain the stock price or a certain increase in value of stock price, and that becomes their overall strategic plan. They also set the objectives or performance targets designed to direct all the activities that must be performed if the company is going to fulfill its mission. Top-level executives routinely scan the external environment for opportunities and threats, and they redirect company efforts as needed. So these top-line executives, when they are going to dinners and they're going to networking events, they're getting information, and that information is going to help them take a lot of different pieces and put it together into a picture that they can interpret and say, you know what, we should get out of making this kind of a product and move towards this kind of a product because I see this coming on the horizon. Middle managers are the folks who report to top management. Common titles include operations manager, division manager, plant manager, and branch manager. Responsibilities include overseeing and assessing the activities of first-line managers. They're responsible for developing and implementing activities and allocating the resources needed to achieve the objectives set by top management. So, in a way, middle management has to interpret what the top management wants and how to prioritize those things and distribute those tasks to the employees who can best manage those activities. First line or frontline managers, job titles vary but include designations such as department head, group leader, office manager, foreman, supervisor. Responsibilities: they supervise employees and coordinate their activities to make sure that the work performed throughout the company is consistent with the plans of both top and middle management. So, you're where the buck stops mostly at this point. This is where, what happens from day to day is much more important than the overall strategic plan because you're focused on operational plans and tactical plans. They're less involved in the higher level planning, more involved in the day to day operations. And most people acquire their first managerial experience at this level. Moving on to organizational structure. The first steps in designing an organizational structure are: number one, identifying the activities that need to be performed in order to achieve organizational goals. Number two, breaking down those activities into tasks that can be performed by individuals or groups of employees. Organizing activities into clusters of related tasks can be handled by certain individuals or groups, and it is called specialization. Its purpose is to improve efficiency as well as make jobs easier to learn. Specialization is great in many ways. However, you do have a lot of downsides. The main one is that when an employee does the same thing over and over again, they get bored and eventually they'll leave. Before long, management will have to deal with decreased performance and increased absenteeism and turnover. So, for example, this was a big issue back in the late 70s, early 80s in the automotive industry because people would literally spend their entire day turning the wrench 3 clicks to the right or 3 clicks to the left. And, people were really making a lot of mistakes because they were so bored they were turning their brains off. Then the Japanese model was embraced, and that is where you have people who are responsible for, there's 3 or 4 people who are responsible for an entire section of the car, and they all have to work together, and that kind of mitigated or helped a lot of the boredom, is that people were now working as a team and had to rely on each other. Departmentalization: these are the activities that are broken into tasks. This means grouping specialized jobs into meaningful units. Depending on the organization and size of the work units, they may be called divisions, departments, or just plain groups. Traditional groupings of jobs result in different organizational structures. Two of the most common departmental types are functional and divisional organizations. So over here on the right, here's a marketing department, and under the marketing president you have the planning guy, the brand girl, the advertising dude, the planning, again, supervisor, who may work with the planning manager, but there's no seniority one or the other, and last but not least, the creative director person. So, you have people who specialize in very specific areas because you need that important information that they can harness. These are not people who are turning the wrench 3 ways. A functional organization groups together people who have comparable skills and perform similar tasks. This form of organization is usually seen in small to medium-sized companies, which group their people by business functions. Accountants are put together, as are the finance people, the marketing and sales people, and so on. So over here on the right-hand side, you're going to see a small company. The president has 4 VPs, pretty much. The R&D guy, that's the research and design. the finance woman, the marketing guy, and the manufacturing woman. So those are the four people who report directly to the president. And then under each of those jobs are two or three other departments, and they report directly to the VP level. They don't necessarily go over the VP to the president's head. That would be considered inappropriate. You have to follow those formal lines of communication. Divisional organizations are usually seen with larger companies. The larger size makes it difficult for managers to oversee operations and serve customers. Consequently, most large companies are structured as divisional organizations made up of several smaller self-contained units or divisions, which are accountable for their own performance. Some common divisions include the product division, the customer service division, a geographical division. So, you might have the regional manager who comes in and once every month or 2 months to check the store or to check the plant. And then the day-to-day management is someone entirely different, but the day-to-day manager has some level of reporting authority to the geographic manager, the regional manager. So this is an organizational chart which you've seen 4 slides in a row now. Once an organization has set its structure, it can represent that structure in an organization chart, which is a diagram delineating the interrelationships of positions within the organization. Reporting relationships are the formal communication chain of command. That cannot be stressed enough. That is so important. Young people who go and get really good jobs, they often mess up by going over their boss's head to talk to their boss's boss. And that is a huge no-no. And if there is a problem in the accounting department, for example, employees should go to the manager of the department. Only if the manager of the department is inappropriate do you go to the president then. Over time, companies revise their organizational structures to accommodate growth and changes in the external environment. It's not uncommon for a company to adopt a functional structure in its early years. Then as it becomes bigger and more complex, it might move to be more of a divisional structure, perhaps to accommodate new products or to become more responsive to certain customers or geographical areas. Some companies rely on a combination of functional and divisional. So you could have several divisions, and then within that division you have the various functional organizations. As a company grows, it tends to add more layers of management between the top and the bottom, and that means it's getting taller. Adding layers of management can slow down communication and decision making, causing the organization to become less efficient and less productive, which we know is exactly what we don't want to do. And this is why companies will restructure in an effort to make the organizational structure flatter. Not be nice to somebody, but to be less tall, shorter. So, with all this talk of managers, what about management style? We can all tell horror stories of really bad managers, and some of us are lucky enough to have really good stories about managers. So, their personalities or their style, their leadership style, is very important to how their employees see them. The management function of directing towards providing focus and direction to others and motivating them to achieve organizational goals. So we know that's the job. We have to motivate people to do their best. Different types of jobs require different leadership styles. Leadership style means the way of interacting with and influencing others. There are 3 common types of leadership: autocratic, democratic, and laissez-faire. So an autocratic leadership style is the type of leader tends to make decisions without soliciting a lot of input from subordinates. They exercise authority and expect subordinates to take responsibility for performing the required tasks without undue explanation. Employees generally dislike working for autocratic leaders, but it is best used in situations where control is necessary, often where there is little margin for error. And as a consequence, you often see this type of autocratic leadership in the military or the construction industry, the prison industry, all of these areas where people's lives are at stake, police, fire people, and more importantly, Martha Stewart, who has been known to be called an autocratic leader because she does know best. It's a good thing. Then we have a democratic leadership style. These leaders generally seek input from subordinates while retaining the authority to make the final decisions. So, it's literally like being the judge. You listen to all sides and then you make your decision. Everyone is given a seat at the table and discussion is relatively free flowing. This style is needed in a rapidly shifting environment where changes come on a regular basis, especially in the IT world or in cell phones. Both of those change on an annual basis, so you have to be very flexible and versatile. Democratic leaders are also more likely to keep subordinates informed about things that affect their work. Not surprisingly, employees like working for a democratic leader, and it is most effective in advertising, design, education, and service industries. Now, this handsome fella on the right is the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett, one of the richest men in the world. He's always in the top 5, top 3 in the United States. This guy started an investment fund that has made billions and billions of billions of dollars. And more importantly, he has diversified and owns many, many, many companies nowadays. Then we have the laissez-faire leadership style. Now, you may remember we discussed laissez-faire in terms of economics. And this kind of leadership style is known as a hands-off approach. You delegate everything, or as much as you can, and you provide relatively little direction to your subordinates. They may advise employees, but usually give them considerable freedom to solve problems and make decisions on their own. Employees find working for laissez-faire leaders rewarding as long as they don't need a lot of guidance to handle their job. If you need help learning your job, this is not the kind of manager you need. Laissez-faire leadership is not ideal where group members lack the knowledge or experience they need to complete tasks and make decisions. This style of leadership has been linked to negative outcomes, including poor job performance, low leader effectiveness, and less group satisfaction. It's in this strange way, it's like having a parent who is really involved. They help you with everything. They tell you what the right thing to do is. They talk stuff out with you. If you have a parent who doesn't do any of that, who's like, whatever, I trust you, go make good choices, you don't know what the good choices are because you've never learned that yet. And so, for younger people who are just starting off in a certain field, a laissez-faire leadership style is very scary. This type of leadership, however, does work best when working with creative, competent, and curious individuals. People have been around the block. People have been to the rodeo before. So, for example, Steve Jobs, one of the founders of Apple, was a laissez-faire leader who would give his vision to his subordinates, and then they would come back 6 months later with a prototype that he either liked or demanded changes to. So, that's it for today. If you have any questions, please feel free to email or text me. If you don't attend this school but still have a question, leave a comment and I will respond as quickly as I can. Thank you very much and have a great day.